In today's show, it's a mailbag episode answering listener-submitted questions about the Blazers' young wings and their upside, plus a stunning stat about the availability of the Blazers' 6 best players this season. Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter Mike Richmond. You are listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts, and also on YouTube, coming at you each and every weekday, Monday through Friday. So make it a part of your daily routine. Make it your first listen. Tell your friends to do the same. It's Locked On Blazers, your team every day. In today's episode, a fun one. We're going mailbag edition. If you want to get involved in a future mailbag where we answer listener submitted questions all episode long, here's how you do it. Email me, lockedonblazerspod@gmail.com. You can just send me an email like whenever you're thinking of it. I typically respond to many. I used to say 80%, but that's probably not true anymore. Many. I respond to many emails. So send me an email there, or just listen to the show, because typically what I will do is I will ask for a listener. I'll say, hey, tomorrow's show or next week's show, we're going to start off with a mailbag. Send me some questions. Many of you did. We have 3 today we're going to roll through, but a bunch of you sent me good ones, and guess what? I'm going to need them as the season progresses. So if you didn't get your question answered on today's show, rest assured it has been saved in a special place in my email inbox, because I'm going to get to them. So what we're going to talk about today is the Blazers' young wings and their upside. I got a pretty stunning stat in the second segment about the Blazers' best 6 players and their availability. And then at the end of the show, we'll talk coaching, a question about the best coach, or the best type of coach rather, to lead the Blazers to where they want to go. Let's get into it. This question comes from Dr. J, who asks, based on what you've seen, which of the 4 young wings, Toumani Camara, Chris Murray, Jabari Walker, Rayan Rupert, has the highest ceiling if you had to prioritize keeping some over others? Let's take the last part first, because I think that's pretty interesting. At some points, the Blazers will have to make tough decisions, right? Some of those decisions are going to come as soon as this summer, because their roster is pretty much it's not full, but they have 4 draft picks. There's no way they draft 4 rookies, but they have 2. They're likely to have 2 first rounders, and they have 2 second rounders. They're probably going to end up with multiple rookies coming out of the draft. I think that's more than one is a pretty safe bet. How many? 3 seems like even too many with 4 draft picks, but we'll see what they end up doing. They're up against the cap, or they're going to be above the cap team most likely until they make some move. So somebody's got to go somewhere. It doesn't have to be one of these young guys. Certainly doesn't have to be one of these young guys, but the future of just the way that an NBA roster building works is, back in the day, you used to keep the same 8-9 dudes for 7 seasons. Roster churn is much faster and much harsher in the league now. So chances are someone at some point of those core 4 will certainly not be on the roster, and it could happen as soon as next fall. But I don't think they have to by any means. There's not like a crunch for playing time, et cetera necessarily. And until we see what the roster looks like, there's no reason to speculate. So let's get to the first part of the question. Based on what that's the you in this sentence, have seen, which of those 4 young wings has the highest ceiling? Well, Rayan Rupert I've barely seen him. I just barely seen him. I went to one remix game. That's the Blazers G League team, and he didn't play. He wasn't on the roster that night. I think when I just saw him play the other nights, he was really intriguing against the T-Wolves, but that's not enough to make, and when he's the 2 times that he's played serious minutes for the Blazers, he's made 3-pointers. So maybe he just is a great shooter and I don't know it. Or maybe it's just the randomness of not playing very often, but I just haven't seen him enough to speak to it. I'll say he's combination of defensive interest, size, length, and maybe variety of skills on offense, the shooting and a little bit off the bounce game, and the size he is. He's certainly intriguing, but I couldn't say he has the highest upside based on what I've seen, because I just haven't seen enough. Chris Murray is an interesting defensive player that can't shoot. I thought he was going to be a shooter. Coming out of college, he shot 33% on 7 attempts a game as a senior, or in his final year at college at Iowa. Played 3 seasons. but he just hasn't been able to shoot, and some of his misses are like way off. Al-Farouq Murray, but like I think he has the makings of a decent NBA player because of the defensive stuff, and then like that he's in the right spot and makes defensive plays and is competitive and physical, but he is just right now not much of an offensive player, so it's certainly not him. So it really comes down to Tumani Kamara and Jabari Walker, and I want to say this: I really like Jabari Walker. He's a fun person. He was former guest on this podcast, but that was a while ago when he was in summer league. But like, I like him as a person. I like his personality. I like the way he plays. But for me, he's second in terms of upside among these guys because I don't exactly see. Well, actually, quite frankly, he's really the second on this list because I think Tumani Kamara is better than him in terms of potential. And I think that speaks more to what I think Tumani can become more than what Walker can be. Jabari Walker is going to play in the NBA a long time. He's just, he's too physical, he's too competitive, and he has too strong of an understanding of how to play basketball for him to not have a long career in the league. Whether that's a long career at the end of the bench or a long career deep, entrenched in a rotation, kind of will depend on what he does on offense. But he's a really good rebounder. He's a competitive defender. He's incredibly physical, and he plays with a chip on his shoulder. He plays hard. He's not a shooter right now, and that's probably going to be the thing that decides what his career kind of looks like in the end. But I am confident he is a long-term pro because I think he just does a bunch of good stuff. Tumani Kamara might just be good. He might end up being good. And why I'm highest on his upside is because I think he has an above-average NBA skill set right now. Tumani Kamara, as a 23-year-old rookie, is a good defensive player in the league. Full stop. Good defensive player. The estimated plus-minus EPM, my favorite of the alphabet soup, metrics has him way, 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 way up there, top 20 in the league in terms of defensive impacts. That probably overstates it a little, but you can watch him play. He's really competitive. And when the Blazers don't, he wants to, but when the Blazers kind of call him back and make him not guard 94 feet the entire game, I think he's even more of an impactful defender just as a point of attack guy. He creates turnovers. He's really physical. His length is really useful. He can guard a lot of different spots. They use him a lot guarding guards, like guarding the sort of pick and roll type point guards and primary initiators, but he's guarded LeBron James, like he's sort of the big primary initiators. They've stuck him on the big apex wings as well, Luka Doncic and stuff like that. Like they give him the toughest assignments. They give him that point of attack assignment, and he's been darn good. Like he's just really competitive. And if you're a longtime listener, you've heard me say this before about Tumani. I think even last week I said that I'm probably higher on Tumani than all the wings. So this question I think I said I was higher on him than Jabari Walker. So I may have already answered this question. If you do listen closely to every episode, shout out to my everydayers, but worth expanding on because it's a good one from Dr. J. I've said this before on the show, but if Tumani develops to a below average offensive player, he's going to be good in the league. Like he's going to be good he doesn't even have to be a good offensive player. He doesn't even have to be particularly special, but if he's just a guy on offense, like kind of like a, replacement level player, that kind of that term like is with capital letters and means something. But if he's just a dude on offense, like not a negative, not a positive, but like kind of a slightly below average offensive player, he's going to be a really good player in the league because of how good he is on defense, and how versatile he is on defense, and his athleticism and his want to on defense. To wit, though, here's something for you. Quietly, in 2024, Tumani Kamara is shooting totally fine from three on low volume. In 2024, he's shooting 36.4% from three on 2 attempts per game. And that's across 27 games in the year 2024. Starting January 1st. He missed the first game of 2024, but in games he has played in 2024, 36.4%. The league average is right around there. It's a little higher than that, but it's just under 37. a league average 3-point shooter on low volume is really starting to see the outlines of what he can be. Over his last 10 games, Toumani Camara is shooting 60% from three. Granted, over his last 10 games, he's taken 23 pointers. The volume is low, but they're going in. 60% from three on his last 20 attempts and across his last 10 games. They're going in. That is the outlines of a guy who's going to be a 3-and-D, like, really useful player. I will say this. You know who could really use Toumani Camara? The Phoenix Suns. He would be exceedingly helpful to them in their quest to be a competent defensive team around their stars. Like, he's exactly the player, the type of flavor of player they need. He's not quite there on offense. The volume, like the shooting is 60% is not like, hey, whatever, but it's nothing to turn your nose up at, but the volume matters. Kevin Pelton taught me this a long time ago, and I believe it's Kevin Pelton of ESPN, is that willingness to shoot threes draws the defense in more than accuracy from three. And Toumani Camara has to turn up the volume. I think the best example of this is this year's Draymond Green, shooting fine from three, does not want to shoot. Teams do not guard him because they are not worried about him shooting, but he's shooting above average from three this season. But do you think of Draymond Green as a shooter? No, and neither do the defenses. So even when the shot goes in, if you're not considering the rim and being aggressive to shoot the ball, no one's going to care. Toumani doesn't need to bomb away from three. The trick with him for the remainder of the season is not to shoot 7 threes a game, but eventually he needs to be someone who takes a higher volume of threes. And I will say the defensive acumen and the shooting that has been better as the season has gone on, the second half of his first season in the league, really, really, really positive signs. Really positive signs. And for me, he has the highest upside of any of those young wings. All right, we got another question. This one is a really eye-opening stat about the Blazers' availability of their best 6 players. We will talk about that in the second segment. First, I want to tell you all about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, patience. That's what brings home the winning trophy, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. And with eBay Motors, they got everything you need to level up your vehicle to its peak performance, from superchargers to roof racks to exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed or power or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts to choose from for your ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, baby, not cash. And with all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. All right, let's keep it rolling with this mailbag edition of the program. And just a reminder one more time for you, if you want to get involved in a future mailbag episode, email me, lockedonblazerspod@gmail.com. This next question comes from listener Jonathan. I'll call Jonathan out right now. Jonathan asked me my least favorite type of question. One that's basically like, hey, Mike, will you look something up for me? Come on, I pay for a couple subscriptions here and there to learn things like cleaning the glass and StatHead to do a better job with this podcast. But like, come on, Jonathan, I know you got the computer. You've emailed me. Jonathan is a longtime listener to the program who's even been a guest on a previous listener summit. And this question was so intriguing that I emailed him back immediately and said, you know what, Jay? I'm going to look this up. I did complain about the level of work it was going to require. It didn't require that much work, but I did say this is harder than you think. But this is intriguing. I'm a curious cat, and this one made me want to get to scratching. Question is, how many total games this year have the following players logged at least 1 minute in the same game? Anthony Simons, Scoot Henderson, Shaedon Sharpe, Malcolm Brogdon, Jeremy Grant, DeAndre Ayton. How many of those 6 guys? How many times have all 6 of those guys appeared in a game for the Blazers this season? I tease this as the Blazers' 6 best players, and I don't think that's true because Scoot Henderson's been pretty bad to start this season, and Shaedon Sharpe's been up and down. He's had some stretches where he's been real stinky. Had a stretch where he was really stinking good too, and I wish he was still healthy because he was one of the bright spots of the season when he was really cooking. But like, in some ways, these are the 6 most like important players in terms of like decisions. Who do you build with? Who's a keeper? Who's not? I think like the vets and Ant and Malcolm and Grant and Ayton are like clearly the Blazers' 4 best players. But Scoot and Shaden are perhaps their 2 most important players on the roster. For me, very clearly the 2 most important players on the roster. Choose your own adventure on that one. But the question is not my opinions of overall value. It's how many times have these guys all appeared in the same game? And in Jonathan's email. The sort of the guess was that it's not 0, but it's not many. It almost feels like 0. And my gut when I read this was like, no, probably like 11, like not many, but probably like 11. And then I went to look it up. 4. They've played in 4 games together. 4. Opening night, December 15th, 16th, and 19th. The Blazers played 60 games this year. 60 games. And they've played 4 of them in which they've had Anthony Simons and Scoot Henderson and Shaden Sharp and Malcolm Brogdon and Jeremy Grant and DeAndre Ayton. It's probably not going to... That number's probably not going to get higher. I don't think Shaden Sharp's going to play again this season. I have no idea if Malcolm Brogdon's going to play again this season. I am very hopeful that Scoot Henderson plays again this season. They've just been so beat up. 4. That's a stunning number for me. I knew it was going to be low. Like I thought it was under 15, but I didn't think it was going to be that low. Anthony Simons gets hurt and misses games 2 through 19, misses 18 games after getting hurt in the opener. DeAndre Ayton gets hurt right around Christmas. Shaden Sharp gets hurt shortly after that, and then comes back. But when he comes back for a handful of games, DeAndre Ayton is not back, and then he's done for. And Malcolm Brogdon and Jeremy Grant have missed games here and there, and Brogdon's now out for an extended period of time with elbow tendonitis. And 4. And it speaks to one of the most difficult parts of this season as a fan and also as a franchise. As a fan, it just stinks because like you want to watch your favorite team. And I don't think that the Blazers would be wholly better. Like, what are they? Like I mentioned this before. It's like if they were like fully healthy, the most generous you could be is something like 7 to 10 wins. And that's probably a lot. Like that's probably being very, very, very generous in terms of like individual impact of these guys. But first of all, 7 wins would be 7 more fun nights during the season. And they would be something like, in the range of the Houston Rockets in 12th place in the West, as opposed to like dipping down towards the fourth worst record in the NBA. So, it would feel very different. So that's a bummer because, but moreover, just like in terms of enjoyment, you would get to kind of see the picture of what they're doing, having Ant and Scoot play together, having Scoot and Shaden play together, having Ant and Shaden play together, having Malcolm play with all 3 of those gentlemen, figuring out what Jeremy Grant and Ayton can do with those 4 guards, and like what does the defense look like? Is it ever competent? Is it ever going to work? Okay, can you put shooting lineups on the court if you have Jeremy and Malcolm Brogdon and Anthony Simons healthy? Does Scoot playing in smaller lineups but with shooters, does that unlock anything? Like all of the questions you might have, none of it gets answered. And that's hard as a fan because it's hard to enjoy a team that's so disjointed. And it's really hard as a franchise because this season was supposed to be a data collection season. This season was supposed to find out what works, what combos work, and what combos don't work. You're supposed to fail, right? Like this is where you have carte blanche to try things that aren't going to work, right? Like this is a great season to roll stuff out in there and say, that doesn't work. Well, let's try it the rest of the week. Like let's figure it out the rest of the week, and then it obviously doesn't work, but let's give it another, another 96 minutes and then we'll bail on it. So you don't even get that because you don't get your sort of core 6 guys all available enough games to have it be anywhere close to meaningful. Dang. 4. 40 might have been a little light, About 40 would have given you at least enough of a run to figure it out. 4 is pretty deflating when you think about sort of all of the big decisions ahead for this team, and they just don't have a lot of stuff to go with. I think they've learned plenty of things this season about Scoot and about Ant. I don't think they've learned much about Shaden. I think they've appreciated what Malcolm Brogdon has brought to the table, and I think you kind of get what you get from Jeremy Grant, and as he's gone on this season, DeAndre Ayton's been better after a really rocky beginning to his Blazers tenure. But have you learned much about them collectively? I don't think so. And that is a challenge. That is hard because this summer, they're going to have to make some big decisions. And it's going to affect, and if not straight up involve trading one of these, if not multiple of these, the 6 guys. And you're doing that with very limited insight into what it looks like. Jonathan, thanks for making me look that up. I complained at the top of the segment, but I'm appreciative because that was fascinating to learn. To me, that's a pretty stunning stat. You were right. It didn't feel like many because it has not been. Okay, in the third segment, I got a question about what is the perfect coach to lead the Blazers out of the rebuild. We'll talk about that to close the show, but first I want to tell you that this next segment is brought to us by our sponsor, BetterHelp. If you are thinking about trying therapy, why not give BetterHelp a try? Therapy can be different for everybody. Most of us have something we're dealing with, whether it's big or small, and it's important to get things off your chest every once in a while. Therapy can be super valuable if you're going through an acute traumatic event, right? If you have a major trauma in your life that you are trying to navigate past, through, or around. But it can also just help you with the everyday maintenance that keeps you on the path. Talking to a neutral third party, a therapist, is going to help you develop the tools to become the best version of yourself. So if you are out there trying to find out the way to sharpen those tools and develop those skills, why not give BetterHelp a try if you're thinking about starting therapy. It's entirely online. It's designed to be flexible, suited to your schedule. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. Still a pass first point guard. I'm still Mike Richmond, and you are still listening to Locked On Blazers, wrapping up a mailbag episode. Email me, lockedonblazerspod@gmail.com if you want to be involved in a future mailbag, or if you just want to, ask me a question that I will not use in the show, but I'll answer via email. This last one comes from listener Brian, who asks, what prototype coach would be the best fit to expedite the rebuild? Everyone wants Chauncey Billups gone, but no one wants to name his replacement. My personal pick would be Kenny Atkinson, since he has already done the starless rebuild in Brooklyn. Yeah, Kenny Atkinson did do a pretty good job with the Karis LeVert, D'Angelo Russell, Jared Allen, kind of a bunch of B+s, getting that team to be a playoff team. That was a fun group, and Atkinson is proved worthy of kind of getting the most out of group without a bona fide star. I want to add a caveat here. This isn't even a caveat. This is just a pet peeve. I think I started the second episode with a pet peeve, or second segment with a pet peeve too. This is welcome to me hosting a solo podcast where I try to make it more fun to be a Blazers fan, and I air my grievances with things. It's my show. I get to do dumb stuff if I want to, but one of my pet peeves is professional NBA opinion havers pretending that they know stuff about who's going to be a good coach or not. I am a professional NBA opinion haver to some extent. I try not to pretend like I have any idea what goes into, like, I kind of know it when I see it with a good coach, right? Like, I think Will Hardy in Utah is a really stinking good coach. It was obvious the moment they started rolling, and it's like, oh, that offense is fun. Last year, and they're going to miss the playoffs back-to-back years, but I think it's pretty clearly, he's a good coach. When you see it, right? But would I have known Will Hardy was going to be a good coach? No, I don't know who Will Hardy was. I know Mark Daigneault is clearly a great coach in OKC. Did I know who Mark Daigneault was? No. I don't watch a lot of OKC Blue games in the G League. I don't know. And And it bothers me when folks pretend like they know. This is just an annoying pet peeve. I think actually what actually bothers me is when people pretend to know anything about what assistant coaches do. You probably don't. I think one of the hardest things to know about coaching is that assistant coaches do actually matter, but we have no idea what even, in many cases, what their roles are and like what their impact is, what their relationship with guys is, who they work with, who they work well with. It's like even folks who are around the team closely, it still can be somewhat of a mystery. So with all that that said, I do have opinions on this stuff. Sure, I'm happy to share them. But I'm not going to name names necessarily because, again, I don't know. I can't look around the league and the G League in Europe and be like, this dude's going to be a good coach. I thought Chauncey Billups would be a better coach than he's been, more effective coach than he's been. I will say this also. The guys who play for Chauncey Billups really like him. So if you were to ask the players, is Chauncey Billups a good coach? They are almost always, to a T, every Blazer that I've ever heard ask this question or asked them myself, defended and appreciated what Billups does. It's an inexact science. It is so much more of an art than a science. So instead of naming names, and Brian, I might be disappointing you when you say no one wants to name his replacement. I'm not about to do that right here. I don't even feel compelled to. Who cares what I think on like in terms of specifics of coaching hires, right? I have an opinion on the prototype, which is how your question was started. I think the prototype, the sort of coach that has appealed to me for getting the most out of a team that's trying to go from okay to good. And the Blazers are not even okay yet, but like eventually, hopefully in the very near future, they'll be okay. And then go okay to good. Good to the next step is really hard. Like, just for instance, like I think Doc Rivers is like a pretty good coach, but when you start to get higher up in the level of what success looks like, Doc Rivers hasn't won at the highest level, so then he looks like a bad coach. But like the Bucks are doing pretty well with him now, so maybe he's a good coach. But when the Bucks lose in the playoffs, is he a bad coach? It's weird, right? It's a weird thing. What I think is the sort of appeal of coaches who have gone to the okay to good are coaches with a very clear sense of what they want to do and an ability to implement that. And I'm thinking of two names, Mike Brown in Sacramento and Ime Udoka in Houston. Ime got to Houston, and they are a top 10 defense in the NBA. Obviously, they added a bunch of good defenders, Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks. But like he has coaxed pretty much an elite defensive team with Alperen Şengün playing in the middle. Like he's a good coach. He knows, no nonsense. He's going to play lean on his vets to kind of get him there. But like, he's someone who had a very clear vision of what they wanted to do and the ability, because he's clearly a very good coach, to implement that vision. And Mike Brown, when he took over in Sacramento, they had an identity. He completely changed. They were going to play extremely fast. They were going to run a cajillion dribble handoffs and actions with Domantas Sabonis as the hub and that sort of crazy lefty handoff game that he can run with him and De'Aaron Fox. And they were just going to be this really, really tough offense to play against because of the speed and their willingness to shoot threes. And they immediately had an identity of who they were. This is who the Kings are. I don't think Billups has done that necessarily. I know he said he wants to play fast and wants the Blazers to share the ball, and he wants them to be the team that nobody wants to play against. And they play hard. To his credit, they play hard this year. They sometimes they get got, but they, for the most part, and the majority of games, they compete and they play hard, and they lose because of talent and their lack thereof. But like the offense, it's never had a true identity. The identity has been like, what does our best players want to do? Okay, ice over Jeremy Grant. Okay, ice over for Anfernee Simons. Okay, DeAndre Ayton gets to shoot mid-range jumpers. Like it really devolves into what are the guys out on the court? What do they want to do? Okay, let's just do that. I mean, and to some extent, all coaches have to fall into that. But I think that would be my complaint with Billups for the most part, is that the inability to implement a very distinct, here's the plan, here's what we're doing. I know you want to do this, but I think we should do it this way, so we're going to do it. In 3 years, he hasn't really been able to do that. he's been dealt a weird hand and a weird thing. And I think this is more about what the prototypical best version of the Blazers' next coach would be than to like come down and be like, John Billups can't coach this team, because I've made it clear that I don't think he's a very good coach. I don't need to hammer it every night on the show. And I will just say this: a coach that could really, really, really put in here's how we want to play, here's how we're going to play, implement a style, and mold players into their vision, as opposed to let players mold the vision around their wants. That's what I think would lead the Blazers the best out of from the okay to good step. The step from good to great is really hard. I think that's where the talent comes in, and where the sort of where there's a disconnect between how much coaches can have an impact. Obviously, really good coaches have a really good impact. That's clear, but it is. I think where coaches have the most say is on teams that are in the middle, right? And teams that are in the middle. It's like, hey, we're going to have a margin of, we're either going to win 38 games or 44 games. And if we win 44 games and make the playoffs, if we win 38, we're going to lose. And those 6 games that you win in the balance because of good coaching or strong identity or playing a certain way and the confidence that instills, that's the impact of coaching. And a coach that could really do that would be the appeal for me. Okay, that's going to do it for today's program. You listened to Wednesday, March 6th show. I appreciate you listening. On Wednesday evening, the Blazers play the Oklahoma City Thunder, and we will talk about that game on Thursday. Friday, I promised this early in the week, and I still don't know. Maybe a very fun interview. If not, next week. Keep rocking with me 5 days a week, wherever you get podcasts, also on YouTube. Tell your friends about the program. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.